Announcements, announcements, announcements. A horrible way to die, a horrible way to die, a horrible way to be oppressed by the Empire to death. A horrible way to die. Announcements, announcements, announcements. Hello, interwebs! I am here to review the latest episode of Star Wars Andor, Season 1, Episode 7, Announcements. And y'all, this show is so good. Every episode is so great. I mean, last episode was one of the best episodes of any Star Wars media, any Disney Plus media, one of the best episodes of television this year. And it follows it up with just an intense look at reactions to this type of galvanizing event that could really just change the course of an empire and sort of galvanize a revolution, which is what Luthen and a lot of other characters were hoping here by making things worse. Just the way that this episode just shows the oppressive and all-encompassing nature of the Empire in sometimes really quick and just fast scenes that just really showcase to you the horror and how things can just turn on a dime and really just absolutely ruin someone's life, but then also just how the lifelong bureaucracy in these systems can do that as well and just wring out any hope that you have for living a life that feels like your own. Just like this episode just... There's too much to say about this episode because it just captures so many things, and I just loved it so much. Let's get into some of the specifics because I have so much to talk about here. First off, let's just talk about Syril Karn because he is a character who's kind of off in his own little storyline here. We get to see again how he is just a man who has been told this whole life that he's supposed to be something by his mother. She meticulously just tears apart his appearance. Oh, you're college too high. You need to show off your family. You're there to represent us. You're getting this job because of your uncle, you know. And then he goes to this job, and it just tears apart his masculinity and sense of self, you know. But then he goes to get this job, and it's just bureaucratic hell, just rows upon rows of just bureaucracy, office cubicles. That's all it is. And he's been told this is supposed to be this big job that can take you far in your career. And we get that last shot of the episode just to end on, where he's just a drone, one of millions of people just doing bureaucratic work that is needed to exist in this empire. And it's just a bullshit job doing bullshit work. And he knows that he's ultimately just a cog in a machine, a meaningless cog that can be endlessly replaced, despite the fact that he's been told by his mother, you need to stand up for your family, sort of thing. It was just his scenes were so brief this episode, and yet it told a cohesive story and arc, and just the just disillusionment you have in fascistic systems like this. It's just so wonderful with just so few words. God, I love this show. Moving on, we have Andor reacting to all of this as well, where he goes back to Ferric, the home that he lived on, and great to see Fiona Shaw back as his mother character, adoptive mother, kidnapped mother, however you want to phrase her as. And Andor just he just wants to escape it. He wants to escape this oppressive empire. He wants to just be done. He spent his whole life living in this crap world, and he doesn't want to. He's not a revolutionary. He just wants to live a life that feels happy, something he can feel something, not just constantly toiling that he's been dealing with his entire life. And so he just asks his mother, because he loves her, to let's just go, let's just leave. And that scene where she talks to him and she says, I can't, I want to stay. I'm too old and I'm done with this. I want to actually fight this. But you've been dealing with this your whole life. I understand if you want to go. And so it's they kind of understand each other. She sort of says that, but it's I can't leave and you can't stay. And it's just so oppressive. And she talks about how she saw her husband hang. And how horrible that was, and how she just can't let that go, that trauma that she faced. She's just so angry at the Empire, and she's ready to fight. And Andor just wants to escape it. He tries to also get Bix in as well, but she's also just too defeated and beaten down as well, and just, just doesn't trust him and doesn't love him in the same way because of all the crap that she went through because of him, even though it wasn't his fault. It was Tim's fault ultimately. But there's just too much trauma there now, and you can't repair that, and that's because of the way the Empire treated all of them and put them in these situations. And you just see that with Andor. Um, and I loved his final sequence of the episode. There's just a quick sequence. He goes to this planet. He's like, I'm gonna just live my life as a tourist for the rest of my life, just living in leisure. That's all he wants to do. And he just is a bystander in this like a completely thing that has nothing to do with him. People doing a robbery, and then he gets pulled aside because he looks suspicious. And then ultimately is basically it's just police brutality there. And it makes me think of clearly this happens in a racial context within the United States quite often. It was something that we saw with the George Floyd protests last year. But in fascistic systems, police brutality is just the name of the game, and often it's stratified upon racial lines and often comes down upon marginalized groups. It can happen to anyone in these types of fascistic systems, and disproportionately affects marginalized people as well. But here it's just showcasing that police brutality and how just looking suspicious can literally get you almost killed and sentenced to 6 years in prison because you're not presumed innocent. You're presumed guilty, and there's no one there that needs to defend you when you live in a system like this. We clearly see this in a lot of rhetoric going around today. I mean, not to bring it to trans issues, but I'll just put it out there, like J.K. Rowling, Queen Turf herself was literally just stating the other day, it's like it's wrong to assume the presumption of innocence in an essay about trans people. And that's a whole other separate subject. Maybe I just destroy my comments for mentioning it, but it's like that sort of rhetoric is out there. And you see it being enacted right here in this show. And I'm like, whew, if that doesn't read real across many different lines, is just really, really interesting to see. Anyways, we don't need to get into a whole thing about J.K. Rowling. I'm sure I've pissed off some people in the comments. I don't want to talk about it, but I figured it was just something that was on my mind here. Moving over, though, we go to the Empire's response to the heist last episode, which sort of ties into everything that we've been going on here. But they sort of crack down. It's like, we're gonna crack down in this way. We're gonna crack down this way. No one's presumed innocent. We're gonna enforce these like really stricter rules. And you hear all the specifics of that. But really, this was what Luthen wanted. Mon Mothma goes to see him, and she says, like, what have you done? People are going to suffer. And he's like, yeah, that's the point. We need to make it worse because people will get pissed off. People will suffer, but it will make them want to fight back. And yes, that's a horrible thing to do. But as he says, if you want to have a conscience, then surrender right now. Because you're not going to win if you have a conscience. You have to do terrible things in order to do this. And it's like, wow, that's dark, but he has a point to a degree. People need to, not that people need to suffer to be able to understand their oppression, but like it will accelerate. It's like throwing gasoline on a fire, I think is probably the best way to put it, and he is doing that, and he's willing to let people suffer more because it means that they will feel it more and they will be more willing to fight back more readily, instead of it being a slowly building thing. Again, throwing gasoline on that fire, and Mon Mothma kind of being aghast at that. And then this leads to a great sequence with Mon Mothma where she talks to her banker friend at this party. And this was such a great moment because she is seen by everyone around her as like a tool of the Empire. Like, she is seen as this senator. She's just, another cog in the machine to a degree. But because of that, like, people don't really trust her. Like, she tries to talk to her friend, and he says, like, hey, I'll just hint at it, like, maybe I'm not exactly the Empire loyalist that you are. And she's like, oh, do you think I'm an Empire loyalist? Well, most definitely I am not. And they have this like very coded conversation. He has to keep reminding him to smile. Like, smile, keep it up appearances, don't forget, because this is dangerous. That scene was just, that was my favorite scene of the episode, but there were so many other great ones, like Ferric Shaw's scene was great too. I loved her line too, Mon Mothma's line, where she says, like, as long as they think I'm an irritant, they will not recognize what I'm really doing. And so it's like, it's just that fine line to walk where she like does this humanitarian stuff, which probably annoys the Empire, but they think if she's doing that, that's the worst. She lets us see that, or we see that, then that's probably the worst that she's doing. And she uses that as a cover. Like, very smart lady. Like, Mon Mothma in this series, so good as well. And then we also have the Empire bureaucracy going on here with Blevin and Deirdre. Blevin tries to go after Deirdre for sort of encroaching in his territory, and Blevin takes the L because Deirdre is able to argue her case and say, like, nah, you basically failed, and I've been able to find this information, and like, look, the rebels don't care about these weird little lines we draw. We have to be opaque with each other, or we have to be clear with each other so that we can find that they're building these networks, because if we're just like competing with each other, which is what the Empire is built upon, like competition between people, sort of like, yeah, this infighting makes you stronger, weeding out the weak, but because of that, it makes the system like be able to take advantage of because people aren't talking to each other. They see each other at odds with each other. And so Blevin takes the L's there. I love that. Yeah, that was, I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I can talk about. I'm just looking at my notes here. We got a K2SO kind of looking machine here. I'm curious. I believe a K2SO Alan Tudyk is supposed to show up in this series. So I was wondering if that was him, but obviously that was not the case. So there was that element of it. Oh, also we got a couple little references to Emperor Palpatine in this. I'll be interested to see if Emperor Palpatine shows up at any point in the series. I doubt it. I know you've had that cameo in Obi-Wan Kenobi's show, but I would be cool to just see like a poor Imperial officer going like, "Hi, Emperor. Some stuff's been stolen, sir." And he's like, "What? How dare you? I'm sitting here being evil." Like, or whatever he's doing. It would be such a great scene, but sadly probably not. We're dealing with lower level people here, not the high Empire stuff. But be curious to see that. Anywho, that's everything that I am thinking about with this episode. Such a fantastic show. I am in love with Andor. Not something I would have thought I would say about a Star Wars show at this point. I've liked the Star Wars stuff that's come out, but like this show, not only best Star Wars show that I've seen, it might be one of the best shows of the season of the year. This is great. That's my thoughts on Star Wars Andor, but I'd love to hear your thoughts beyond that. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all, my friends, live long and prosper.